This is lesson 25 for Algebra 2, Complete the Square. Our objective today, students will solve quadratic equations when a is equal to 1 and we're using Complete the Square. I've taught you different ways to solve. We talked about GCF, which is one of the first steps to factor. But I've taught you also how to graph. Let's say we had a graph, an x and y axis, and I asked you to graph a quadratic equation. Okay, how do we know what the answers are here? Where it crosses the x-axis or the y-axis? The x-axis, right? Okay, good. The x-axis, good. Right here and here. Right? So wherever it crosses the x-axis, that's where the solutions are. All right? That's kind of tedious, right? It's a lot of extra work. So then I taught you about x-box, right? Today we're going to talk about completing the square. The key word up here is square, and in math we always talk about inverses. Squaring is nice because the inverse of squaring is square what? Square root. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay. So today's an extra method. We talked about Xbox. Here's the next method. Today's method is longer than Xbox, and it's not always the best way to do things. Today's method, we're going to use simple problems that you could have done Xbox on, but we're using simple problems so that you can get through the process, okay? Because I want to make sure you understand the process all the way through, okay, before we do harder problems, all right? Just a little quick reflection. Think about what's the square root of 4? What's the square root of 4, everyone? 2? No, not just 2. Plus or minus 2. When I take a square root, how many answers do I always have? 2 plus or minus 2. Make sense? Okay, good. Here are the steps, and I took out step 5. We don't have to make two equations. You're going to assume that we have two equations, right? Because when we take a square root, how many answers do we have? 2. So you have to assume that there are two equations, but I'm going to show you something here later, showing that there are that there are two equations, but we're going to do it a little differently. Okay, so here we go. Number one. Now, number one, I know I could use Xbox on, but I'm going to show you how to do it using complete the square, because my directions say solve each equation by completing the square. So the first thing I want to do is look for any constants here and move them to the opposite side of the squared sign. So it says plus 24, that's my constant. I want to move all my constants over. Opposite of plus 24 is minus 24, so I'm subtracting 24 on both sides. So we got x squared minus 14x is equal to 0 minus 24, which is negative 24. Okay, that's the first step. Then I'm going to complete the square. I need to look at my b. The way I complete the square is I take half of my b and then I square it. Okay, so negative 14 is my b. Half of negative 14 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So I'm going to add 49 here. And I'm going to, whatever I do on one side of the equation, I have to do the opposite side, so I'm going to put 49 on the opposite side and draw a line there, okay? So what I just did is I completed the square. Again, I took half of negative 14, or half of b. To create my c, I took half of b, divided by 2, and then square it, okay? So again, half of negative 14 is negative 7. 7 squared is 49. Added 49 on both sides. Okay, this left-hand side now is a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. So I know I could factor it like I showed you a couple weeks ago. So I could take the square root of x squared and bring it down. I know the square root of 49 is 7, but we have a negative sign, so it's x minus 7. So another way to write this whole perfect square trinomial is x minus 7 squared, which is equal to negative 24 plus 49. Negative 24 plus 49 is 25. Okay. Now that the squared sign is isolated on the left-hand side, I could do the opposite of squaring, which is square root, to get rid of it. So I'm going to take a square root of both sides. Okay, square and square root cancel out. Okay, square root of 25, I know there are two answers for the square root of 25. Square root of 25 is positive 5 and negative 5, so I'm going to bring down x minus 7. And then we know that the square root of 25 is positive negative 5. Okay, at this point I know there are two answers. So I can make two equations, okay? So actually I'm going to redo something here. Okay, so we have x minus 7 is equal to plus or minus 5. So I want to isolate the x, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I'm adding 7 here and here. So we're going to have x is equal to 7 plus or minus 5, okay? Which just seems a little unusual, right? But we think about it this way. Then I ask myself, what's 7 plus 5? 7 plus 5 is 12, right? And then it's also 7 minus 5. What's 7 minus 5? 2. So then we know our answer is going to be x is equal to 12 and x is equal to 2. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, again, from the top, what did I do? Move the constants over, took the constants 24, opposite of positive 24 is subtract 24 on both sides. I left space here. These 49s were not here. The way I got the 49s, I took half of negative 14, which is negative 7, right? And then I squared it. Negative 7 squared is 49. Added it both here and here. This left side is a perfect squared trinomial, so all I did is I took the square root of x squared, brought it down as x, and then all I really did is half of negative 14 is negative 7. Brought that down. Simplified negative 24 plus 49 is 25. Took the square root of both sides because we had a square on one side, so I wanted to take that away. So if x minus 7 is equal to plus or minus 5. Added 7 on both sides, so x is equal to 7 plus or minus 5. And then I just simplified. What's 7 plus 5? 7 plus 5 is 12. 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay? That's what I did on number 1. Okay? Watch me do number 2 now. Okay, number 2. We have constants of negative 57 on the left side and on the right. I want to move all my constants to the right side of the equation, so I'm going to add 57 to both sides first. And when I do that, I'm going to rewrite it, leave a little space to complete the square. Negative 7 plus 57 is positive 50. Then I want to complete the square here. B is 10. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25, so I'm adding 25 to both sides. Okay? So this left side now is a perfect square trinomial. So half or square root of n squared is n. Well, 50 plus 25 is 75. Square root of n squared is n. Half of 10 is positive 5. Put a square sign in my equal sign. Square sign is by itself now. I can take the square root of both sides. When I do that, I get n plus 5 is equal to plus or minus square root of 75. And I know that 75 I can rewrite as 25 times 3, right? So n plus 5 is equal to 20, square root of 25 times 3. Square root of 25 is 5, right? And then this 3 stays on the inside. So I just simplified the rad 75 to be 5 rad 3. Okay? We know how to do that already. Bring down the rest of the problem. And I'll simplify the rest. Now I want to isolate the n, so I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. When I do that, I get n is equal to negative 5. Plus or minus 5 rad 3. 5 rad 3 is irrational, so I can't combine it with negative 5. So this is a perfectly good answer. Okay? And what that's saying is that this graph, when I graph it, it's going to be a negative 5 plus 5 rad 3 and negative 5 minus 5 rad 3. 2 answers. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions on numbers 1 or 2? This is really tedious, right? It's a lot of work. Could I have done Xbox on number 1? Could you have done that in your head, right? Why did I do it? Because I wanted you to see the process, okay? So, could I have done Xbox on number 2, though? No. No, you can't. Okay? You can't. So we have to make sure that we know how to complete this work. All right? So before you start writing things down, I want you to talk to your neighbor about this. So let's have 2s start today. 2s are telling the 1s about number 1, and the 1s tell the 2s about number 2. Ready, set, talk. Okay, so number 3. We have a squared minus 6a minus 7 is equal to 0. Now raise your hand if you could do this in your head using Xbox. Okay, right? We know we could do that on a test. When I ask you to complete the square, please do complete the square. But if it just says solve, then use whatever method's going to get you there the fastest and the most reliable. Okay, but for today we're using a simple problem for complete the square. Okay, so let's do this one together. What I mean by together, you will be telling your neighbor the step, and then you're going to tell me the step, and then we're going to keep going together, so don't go ahead. So first step, what would you do? Tell your neighbor? Okay, so what am I doing, everyone? Okay, good. So I'm adding 7 to both sides first. Okay, so we got a squared minus 6a. What should I make sure I leave there? A blank space. That's right. 0 plus 7 is 7. Good. Turn to your neighbor and tell him what you do next. Okay, so what am I doing next? Someone. Half of 6, or half of negative 6 is? Negative 3. What's negative 3 squared? All right, so we're going to add 9 to both sides. 9 here and here. Okay? This left-hand side, tell your neighbor what can we assume the left-hand side is now? A perfect what? Perfect square what? Good. It's a perfect square trinomial. Repeat, perfect square trinomial. Turn to your neighbor, tell them the left side is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, good. So the left-hand side you could factor out. We could assume it's a perfect square trinomial. Here's the shortcut. What's the square root of a squared? A, good. Square root of 9? 3, right? But it's going to be negative 3 because the middle sign is negative, right? Or here's another way. This is how I do it quickly. I never think about it. I just take square root of a squared is a. What's half of negative 6? What? Negative 3. Just bring that down, okay? That's how you do it quickly. And you need to know that trick. You take half of the middle number and you bring it down. Because when we do harder problems, you'll want that trick. Okay, what's 7 plus 9, everyone? 16. Okay, turn your neighbor and tell them what you would do next. Okay, what's that? What do we do next? Putting a radical in there or taking a square root of both sides, right? So the square root cancels out with the square, leaving just a minus 3. What's the square root of 16? Good, plus or minus 4. Not just 4, but plus or minus 4. What would you do next? Add 3 to both sides. We're adding 3 here and adding 3 here. So we now got a is equal to 3 plus or minus 4. Okay, turn your neighbor, tell them what the two answers are. You got 3 plus 4 and 3 minus 4. Okay, what's one of my answers? What's 3 plus 4, everyone? 7. Good. What's 3 minus 4? Good, that's it. Now, could I have used Xbox here? Yeah, I could have, right? Okay, let me see I want to see your whiteboards just to make sure. Number 4, we got m squared plus 6m minus 57 is equal to negative 2. Okay? Turn to your neighbor, tell them what the first step is. Okay, what am I doing, everyone? I'm adding 57 to both sides, so we got m squared plus 6m is equal to negative 2 plus 57 is 55, okay? Turn it over, tell them how to complete the square here. How do we complete the square? Okay, so half of 6 is what? 3 squared is? Adding 9 to both sides. Okay, left side is a what? We could assume it's a what? 3 words? Perfect square trinomial. So what would you write as a perfect square trinomial? What's the square root of m squared? M. Square, or half of positive 6 is? Positive 3. Square that. What's 55 plus 9? 64. Good. What would you do next? Okay, what are we doing next, kids? Square root of both sides. It's got m plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 8. Okay, finish up my problem for me. Go. The remainder of the problem, we're subtracting 3. Negative 3 plus 8 is 5. Negative 3 minus 8 is negative 11. Good. Questions on 4? Good? All right, keep going. Let's do number 5. Number 5. I'll start you off. Of course, we had 20 to both sides. Oh, before that, I got a question for you. Okay, on number 5, can we do X blocks on this one? Are there any numbers that multiply to negative 20 but added up to negative 6? Yes or no? No. So on this one, you couldn't do X blocks, so you'd have to do complete the square, okay? So again, we're going to add 20 to both sides. I'm going to start you off. we got p squared minus 6p is equal to 0 plus 20, which is just 20. Okay? What would you add as c to both sides to complete the square? What am I adding to c on both sides to complete the square? What? 9, right? Half of negative 6 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is positive 9. So we're adding 9 to both sides. So square root of p squared is p. Half of negative 6 is negative 3. Okay? And then we have, it's equal to 29. Alright. And of course, what are we going to do next after I do that? Square root, both sides, right? So p minus 3 is equal to the positive and negative square root of 29. Is there a square root of 29? No. Okay, good. Now finish up my problem. Look at number 2 for help on your answer. Go. Here, we can't simplify rad 29. 29 is a prime number, right? We can't do anything with that. So we just add 3 to both sides. When we do that, we got p is equal to 3 plus or minus rad 29. I can't combine 3 and rad 29 because rad 29 is an irrational number, so we're just going to leave it like that. Okay, so positive 3 plus or minus rad 29 is your answer. So you put a minus sign in front of the 3, that's incorrect. Okay, good. Last one, number 6 by yourself. Number 6 by yourself. All the way through by yourself this time. I'll check up on you in about a minute or so. First thing you want to do is we want to add 44 to both sides. So we're going to add 44 here. And when we get that, we got x squared plus 18x is equal to 40. Okay, then we're going to complete the square. Half of 18 is 9. 9 squared is 81. So I'm adding 81 on this side and the opposite side. Okay, so left side is a perfect square trinomial. Square root of x squared. What's the square root of x squared? X, right? What's half of positive 18? Positive 9. Okay, that's all you got to do is bring that down. 40 plus 81 is 121. Square root of both sides is x plus 9 is equal to plus or minus 11. Subtract 9 from both sides. We got x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus 11. Negative 9 plus 11 is 2. Negative 9 minus 11 is negative 20. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, good. That's it. Most of you got that at the end, so I feel pretty good. So you could clean up your iPads. That concludes our lesson for